Hey, what's up guys, it's BenBonk and welcome back to the 45th Slimekeep Devlog. In this devlog, I added some more lore to the game and created a new weapon unlocking system. Also, if you're new here, Slimekeep is a fast-paced roguelike where you must kill and capture slimes to stop the corruption that has infected your land. Without further ado, let's get into it. Now, if you watched the last Slimekeep Devlog, you may know that I've recently been adding lore rooms to the game where the player can learn more about the lore of Slimetopia. And while I finished the Goose Station, we still had some more lore rooms that I wanted to add to the game, so let's get started. Firstly, with the help of Execute Baja in my Discord, we had this new temple lore room, which I thought looked super cool. The player could enter this temple and encounter this NPC who looks very familiar. But inside this temple, the player could ask this wise guru guy some randomized questions about the lore in the game. There isn't too much else to this room, it's really just a place for the player to gain some lore knowledge if they'd like to. But the next lore room in the game had a bit more to offer, and this lore room was the apartment complex. So to start off creating this lore room, I added this apartment building, which looks super cool, so thanks again to Execute Baja for helping with the design. With that added, it was now time to add some life to this room in the form of NPCs. So I made this standard NPC, as well as this NPC who I imagine to be a soccer or football player in which the player can play soccer against as a bit of a minigame. And because I wanted to make a soccer minigame, we needed a goal. So I threw together this simple isometric-ish goal, as well as a kind of beaten up soccer ball. Now with this all set up in game, the room felt much more alive and fun overall. But we still couldn't actually interact with these NPCs yet, so I worked on adding some simple dialogue. We can talk to this guy at the top, who just gives a little bit more lore information. And then we can head down and talk to our soccer friend, who tells us that he's the rank 1 goalkeeper in Slimetopia, and everyone calls him Peter Slimekeep. And I wanted the player to be able to challenge this NPC to a bit of a penalty shootout, so I hopped back into Sprite and made some new art for the soccer game screen. First, we had this enlarged goal sprite, which I actually think turned out pretty well, and then we had this soccer goalie who is now facing forward and ready to dive, and finally a target which would kind of act like the cursor or where the player would shoot the ball. Then back into Unity I was, and I set up all this new art into a scene with the goal and goalie. But then for actually programming, I just kind of set that up under the hood, and boom, the soccer minigame was now playable. So I can walk over to the soccer player here and tell him, I bet I can score on you. This will then start the minigame, and as you can see, we have this cursor target moving from side to side. I can then click once and the cursor will stop in position and start moving up and down. Then if I click again, I will now actually shoot the ball, and uh-oh, it looks like the soccer player might actually be the rank 1 goalie in Slimetopia. But thankfully we have 3 total shots, so I'll take another one here, and yeah, still no luck. But then on my final shot, if I get a very well placed shot, the goalie will try to save it, but to no avail, and boom, we scored. There currently isn't a reward for scoring or anything, it's more just for fun. However, I might make a skin for the player if you score enough goals sometime in the future, but I'll just have to see. Anyways, that's the soccer minigame right there, as well as the apartment's lore room, and I'm pretty happy with how it all turned out. Although yes, I know you can't actually enter the building, but I just thought that'd be a bit too much work to make, so sorry about that. But I'm also sorry if you haven't wishlisted Slimekeep on Steam yet. In my last devlog, I mentioned that we were at 7 whole wishlist, but we made it to a whopping 12 since then. Can we get it to 15? It really helps and takes like 2 seconds to do so please consider clicking the link in the description. Anyways, moving on, while I did like these dedicated lore rooms, I wanted to add some more subtle lore to the game that the player could slowly discover over time. And to do this, I was pretty heavily inspired by Stardew Valley and its secret note system. Basically, if you don't know, in Stardew Valley, common actions such as clearing weeds or chopping trees provide a small chance for a secret note to drop. These secret notes contain all kinds of information about the villagers in Stardew Valley and can also give the player unique quests to go on. And I just thought this concept would be perfect in Slimekeep to have lore notes, so the player could slowly gather notes the more they play and understand more of the lore of the game if they please. So to get started, I first made this File Explorer icon because I had the idea to make it so the player could view their collected secret notes inside of the computer in the game. So I set this icon up and a basic panel in the game, so the player can now open up the File Explorer window and view their secret notes. I also made a test secret note here where if I click on this note, another window pops up with a brief message. The player can drag this window around if they'd like and press the X button to close it. And if you're wondering, yes, I basically just copied the code here from my GMTK Game Jam entry, Ronald's Revenge. But next, we now had a whole lot of UI to set up with all these secret notes in the File Explorer. I planned for there to be about 15 secret notes in the game, so I had quite a bit of work to do because each note needed its own button and associated window. But eventually, I set up all these notes. In game, we can now open them up, or not. This is because I made it so by default, all these notes would be locked. I made this unlock secret notes array in which I could specify the numbers of each note that I wanted to be unlocked. So for example, if I set the unlock notes to be 1, 9, 5, and 13, then hit play, and these secret notes are now unlocked with an updated sprite. I can also actually click on these unlocked notes to open them, and yeah, there you go. But now the player needed an actual way to unlock these secret notes. And my first way of doing this was through these stacks of paper, which was a previously existing decoration. For all the existing stacks in the game, I added in a chance for these stacks to now drop a secret note. Upon picking these notes up, we can now head back to our computer and view our newly unlocked secret notes. But it wasn't just these paper stacks. I also gave slime enemies a small chance to drop these notes as well, so there was at least one other way to collect them. So yeah, that's the new secret note system. I didn't want to show too many of the notes themselves to keep them a bit of a surprise, but hopefully this should help round out the game's lore a bit. Anyways, before moving on to the next big update to the game, I made a few small tweaks and added some polish to parts of the game based on player feedback. First, I added a snowflake on top of slimes when they are freeze from weapons that shoot freezing projectiles to just convey to the player a little more clearly that these slimes were frozen or slowed down. Next, I added some small particles when the player collects a slime ball to make it so these slime balls don't just disappear when the player collects them. And finally, to the Goopy Bird minigame, which I added in the last devlog, I made it so the Goopy Bird itself will actually rotate up and down when flying, as previously it wouldn't rotate and just looked quite static. But now for my next big change, I've got quite a bit of feedback over the past few months to make weapons in the game be unlockable throughout runs, just so the player doesn't have access to potentially use every weapon from the moment they open the game. And I definitely felt like this would be a good idea and add some more replayability and excitement to runs, so I got to work. But before I could get to unlocking weapons, I ended up making a pretty big change to the weapon system, being the arsenal. This is a new page in the player's computer that contains a list of all the weapons that the player has unlocked. You can hover over any of these weapons and it'll display its name, which I think is pretty nice. But more importantly, you may notice that I split the weapons in the game into two tiers, being Tier 1 and Tier 2 weapons. My thought behind this new organization system was that Tier 1 weapons would just be your kind of standard weapons, and Tier 2 weapons would be slightly better overall, or maybe just more unique. This way of organizing things would hopefully convey to the player which weapons are better than others, and would also make it easier when having random drops like chests, for example, choose what kind of pool of weapons it wants to drop from. But enough said, I then planned out what weapons I wanted the player to have unlocked by default, and which weapons I wanted the player to have to unlock. So now in the arsenal, this can be seen by the blacked out weapons. And you'll probably notice that most of the weapons that are unlocked by default are Tier 1 weapons with only a few Tier 2 weapons unlocked by default. I just figured this way the player would have a decent introduction to the weapons while still having a few more powerful ones, but give them the ability to unlock some of the more unique ones over time. Although I tried to make sure that this starting pool was fairly big, as the last thing I would want is to make the game's weapons feel repetitive right from the start. But anyways, I then made these two lists of unlocked Tier 1 weapons and unlocked Tier 2 weapons, which would basically be the pool from which shops, chests, and everything in between would pull from when choosing a weapon. So this was a good start, but we still needed a way for the player to actually unlock weapons over time. And to do this, I had an idea. I made this kind of shady looking guy in A-Sprite as well as a crate to go along with them. My plan was for this guy to appear in certain types of rooms and allow the player to pay a fee to unlock his crate, which would contain a previously locked weapon that the player could now have unlocked for all future runs. I also thought it'd be cool to take inspiration from CSGO cases because I feel like spinning to unlock a weapon would be so much more entertaining than just instantly unlocking it. So after a bit of setup, I made these panels which contain locked weapons and can move around together. Then in game, I set it up so that each of these panels would contain their own unique weapon that would be completely random and chosen from a pool of weapons that the player hasn't unlocked yet. Next, I made the actual spinning animation, which moved forwards and then back. I know this probably isn't as satisfying as an actual CSGO case opening, but oh well, it just seemed easier to do it this way and did not have to duplicate the panels as many times. I also set up the crate seller himself and placed him inside of a few of the lore rooms in the game so the player can pay 25 of their slime balls to open up the crate and unlock a new weapon. Finally, I just set the actual new weapon pools to work with all the shops and random weapon drops in the game, so yeah, that's the new weapon system in the game, so let me know what you think. But that's all I have for this devlog, thanks for watching, and don't forget to wishlist Slimekeep on Steam, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.